There are some misconceptions out there about the best second citizenship to get if you are an American, especially if you're considering possibly not being an American in the future. Today, I'm going to give you some advice that could save you tens of thousands of dollars. If I'm an American and I'm looking for the best second passport, I'm going to do a couple of things first. So let me go through the thought process, and then I'll get into a specific misconception that I think you should be aware of and you can plan around. I'm going to want to have not only dual citizenship, but if I'm an American, and especially if I think at some point, I may not want to live in this country, I may not want to carry a U.S. passport, I'm going to want to have 3 passports. That, I believe, is the standard that not only I believe works in this day and age, other people in the business, other successful people believe, hey, 2 is 1, 1 is none, 3 is the best, be a triple citizen. So that's the first thing. And so if I'm going to start looking at that, I can go a couple different directions. If I'm an American, the best second passport to start with could be through my own family tree, could be through marriage, could be if I was born next door. So any kind of family-based passport. If I was born in Canada, born in Mexico, if I'm married to someone who was, let's say, born in France or born in Italy, I'm able to get those passports without actually going there. So if I'm born there, I am already a citizen. If I'm married to someone, I may be able to work towards that without moving to the other country full-time. And if I have an ancestor, parent, grandparent, great-grandparent, even further back, I can claim that citizenship by descent. It's not always as easy as it seems. There are hiccups sometimes. Plenty of people, they have a broken chain, for example. They can't claim their Italian passport because somebody was naturalized before the next person was born. But if I have some kind of family tie, I might start there as my first passport. It feels better. It's a high-quality passport that maybe, if I'm Italian or Irish or any number of other European nationalities, Canadian, that replaces a U.S. passport basically. So that's a good place to start. And then from there, I can look at my third passport where am I willing to move somewhere? I can be naturalized. Am I willing to live in Portugal on a self-sufficient visa? If I do that, I can get a passport there. If I'm already European, probably doesn't make sense. But okay, if I'm European, do I move to Mexico and work towards their citizenship? Do I move to, tax-friendly, Costa Rica or Uruguay and work towards their second citizenship? All right, so am I willing to move somewhere to get that third citizenship? Am I willing just to make a donation to get citizenship by investment in the Caribbean? If I'm American, European, and Caribbean citizen, that's a pretty good mix. And so these are the kinds of things that I want you to start with. You could also reverse it, by the way. I don't have a claim to anything else, but I'm going to start with citizenship by investment. If I'm, a great, highly successful, very wealthy business person, maybe there's some fast-track naturalization I can take care of, and then I'm going to work on the slower one. So you can go either different track. You can start with the family and then go more to the investment. You can start with the investment and then focus more on moving somewhere else or getting a golden visa or something like that. My name's Andrew Henderson. I'm the founder of Nomad Capitalist. We've helped over 1,000 high net worth individuals and ultra high net worth individuals over the years legally reduce their taxes overseas, increase their freedom and their options with dual citizenship and other strategies, and also grow their opportunities by making investments and doing other things like that. You can learn more at nomadcapitalist.com. So the piece for me is why Americans especially would want a third citizenship is you already know the U.S. policy on taxing, regulating, and overseeing what you do as a citizen overseas. Do I think you'll have more countries in the future, not a lot, but a handful, that might try some version of extraterritorial taxation, meaning, hey, if you're Canadian and you live in a place that we don't like, we're going to tax you. So if you move to Dubai, hey, we don't like that. Why are you trying to not pay taxes? Pay us some taxes. There's been politicians who've suggested that. Is that going to happen anytime soon? Who knows, right? Like bankruptcy, it happens very slowly and all at once in these countries. But you already know the U.S. policy. Yes, you can dramatically reduce, if not eliminate, your taxes under the foreign earned income exclusion by using foreign corporations. Much easier if you're an entrepreneur running a business than if you're just making investments. Puerto Rico, perhaps superior for as a place to live to reduce taxes for people who are investing, whether that's in cryptocurrency or stocks, what have you. But you know the U.S. policy. And so if you decide in your quest of obtaining multiple citizenships that you want to live outside of the United States. Let's say you have a European citizenship through ancestry. Let's say you get Malta's citizenship, which is the creme de la creme. You get their donation-based citizenship in 15 months. You've got all the same privileges. It's going to cost you close to $1 million, but you have all the same privileges as someone whose grandfather was Italian, right? And so you can do that, and it's probably going to be done faster than an Italian passport by descent. If you were to go and live in Europe for a number of years, that's a pretty powerful thing. You're going to have a passport as good as you had in the United States. You'll have, generally speaking, the ability to return to the United States should you ever give up your citizenship. But let's say you go and live in Europe because you got a European passport. You're Italian, you can go and live in tax-friendly Cyprus. or you are Irish and you can go and live in tax-friendly Portugal. If you decide to go and live there, are you going to want to keep a U.S. passport when you have a passport of equivalent value that would allow you to, in most circumstances, certainly criminal records and just other issues could get in the way, but for most people, if you're Irish, if you're Italian, we see they come back to the United States and visit. And so you might ask yourself, if you're living overseas, why do I have this passport where they want to tax me? I have to file tax returns. I've got to report my foreign bank accounts. I've got a trust to protect my assets overseas. I've got to report that. It's a lot of paperwork. And you know what? Maybe I don't even have to pay any tax, but maybe it costs me $50,000 a year to do my taxes. Would you keep that U.S. passport if you're living overseas? Right? If you chose not to, now you're down to 2 passports. Right? And so if you follow my advice and had 3, now you're down to 2. Now, here's the misconception people talk about, is people say, well, if I don't have a visa waiver program passport, there's about 40-some countries, they could just come back to the United States. You fill out a form online. You've got to answer some questions. If you've been rejected for a U.S. visa before, if you've been to Iran or Yemen or places like that, if you have a criminal record, you may not be eligible for that. Whatever your nationality, Italian, British, whatever, you might be out. We've had a few clients over the years who I think had visited Iran just like on a tour or something, just for fun. And they had to go into the embassy. They generally got their visa, but guess what? They didn't renounce their citizenship. They weren't like, we don't like you. And so the idea is, okay, if you're not going to get one of those passports, if you're not going to get a visa waiver program passport, which is Malta, which is pretty much all the European countries, Chile, Australia, New Zealand, and a few Asian countries like Japan and South Korea and Taiwan. If you don't have one of those, which, the European ones I just mentioned how to get, the Asian ones you're probably not going to get. The other ones, Canada's not visa waiver, but it has a special deal. You have to move there to get citizenship if you don't have it. You have to pay a lot of tax to get it. What would be the point of that? Chile perhaps is doable, but you do have to live in Chile for some time. And so people say, okay, you know what? I don't want to spend the big money for Malta. I don't have an ancestor. I don't want to relocate. I'm going to go to the Caribbean and I'm going to buy citizenship. I'm going to do a Citizenship By Investment program. My advice is to make the donation. I happen to choose St. Lucia because I follow my own advice and I had more than one second passport. And so St. Lucia complemented what I already had. I see a lot of Americans going to St. Lucia in the statistics, perhaps in part because they had, hey, this guy Andrew did it. I already had my other passports, and St. Lucia complemented it. If I was only getting one passport, it would not have been St. Lucia. I would have spent a little bit more, or would have gotten something different. And by the way, the passports have changed in the last 6 years since I got mine. But one thing that people are saying is, go to Grenada. Grenada is the one country out of 5 that has membership in the U.S.'s E2 program. This is basically where if you have at-risk capital in a U.S. business, which is not clearly defined, we think we had one gentleman, was a client who was British, and he had like $100 and some thousand, which seemed pretty low. Generally, you think $200,000, $250,000, the more the merrier perhaps, but you've got to have at-risk capital, you've got to have employees, and it's going to be something where it's a real business. They don't want like, I'm running a digital marketing agency. Like, what? They want like, I'm moving dirt. I got 10 guys with a truck and the dirt's being moved from here to there. Okay, we understand. All right, come on in. And so that's a way that if you wanted to move to the United States, if your passport has E2 status, you can take advantage of that program. Or, hey, I'm going to start a business in the U.S. I'm going to get a non-immigrant visa. I don't have to pay taxes by default because I'm not a green card holder. A green card holder is an instant taxpayer. So if you get married to an American and you get a green card, now you're a U.S. taxpayer the same as a citizen. Not much of an advantage, and you have some of the downsides, like you don't get to come and go whenever you please as a green card holder. But an E2, we had one guy who had an E2 for 30 years. Just came and went whenever he wants. Some years he lived in the U.S. and he paid U.S. taxes as a U.S. person because he spent too much time there. Other years he didn't need to be in the U.S. He didn't want to be in the U.S. He had business somewhere else and he didn't have tax liability except for that U.S. business. The dirt moving business had to pay U.S. tax as any other U.S. source business would, but everything else he had overseas was untaxed. So that's the benefit. People think, oh, I don't want to try and get a tourist visa to come back. Let me get this E2 visa to come back. And so Grenada is the only country in the Caribbean that has it. If you're St. Lucian, you're not eligible for E2. If you're Dominican, you're not eligible for E2. Grenada is, I suppose, because they were invaded and maybe they felt bad for them. I don't know. But also, if you look at other passports, Turkey offers this now, and you've seen a lot of Chinese who are going, and they've made Turkey the #1 citizenship program in the world. And I think in part because, hey, why donate $150,000 for a single applicant in Grenada plus a bunch of fees when for lesser fees and an actual investment in real estate, which I've shown can actually go up in dollar terms, even in crazy inflation, currency collapsing times, that's a better deal, right? So now it's $400,000 investment in Turkey. The number went up, but that could be an alternative to Grenada. My strategy, if you're an American or you're going to have multiple passports, is if one of them is going to be in the Caribbean, that passport doesn't need to be an E2 country. You can get some other passport by descent. Many passports you would get through your family tree are E2 countries. You could put a Caribbean passport and a Turkish passport together, and Turkey has the E2. You could get a paper residence that has E2. Americans have a good deal in the sense of there are certain countries like in Central America that only allow dual citizenship under certain circumstances. You've got more opportunities because they, in some cases, have citizenship agreements with the U.S. They don't with everybody else. So you have access to more passports than others. Take advantage of that, and don't. What I'm saying is, don't go to Grenada and spend $50,000 more. It's a $150,000 donation for a single versus $100,000 in St. Lucia and Dominica versus $130,000 for a family of 4 in Antigua and Barbuda. Why pay $50,000 more? If you like Grenada, fine. Some people mention, Grenada's not in the hurricane belt. Okay, well, if you're any of the other Eastern Caribbean citizens, you can just go to Grenada. You can just be there, right? So, people have a misunderstanding of which citizenship is the best. But my point is, number one, why spend $50,000 more for a passport when you can put that $50,000 towards some other second passport? Right? I mean, if you buy property in Turkey and if the opportunity cost doesn't bother you, you can buy $400,000 in property. The legal fees will be less than $50,000 extra because now you've got 2 sets of legal fees. You won't spend $50,000, close to it, in legal fees. We help clients find property in Turkey, and right now it's very difficult to be in the right neighborhoods and to buy property that can actually hold its value in U.S. dollars, maybe even go up. My recent appraisal shows it can go up. And so even with all of our effort in finding the property, paying all the legal fees, hiring top-level lawyers, that's what we do for our clients, the costs aren't anywhere near $50,000. So if you've got the money to spare, why not just get your 3 passports and save $50,000 on the front end on the Caribbean passport and put that money something else? We have people who are Armenian descent, another E2 country. So if you were baptized in an Armenian church, if your family's Armenian, you can be Armenian, that's E2, right? It's not going to cost you $50,000 or anywhere close to claim that. Again, there are paper residence countries. Wait 3 years to get E2. So most people who get a second passport today are not going to immediately want to renounce their citizenship. I knew before I ever left the United States that one day I wanted to renounce my citizenship. It just wasn't the country for me. Most people, I don't think, feel that way. They want to feel it out. And so even in my case, even knowing that I wanted to do that before I even left the US, it took me years of living overseas to be like, all right, now is the time. Now I can be sure this is the right decision. And so you could get a Caribbean passport for $50,000 less than Grenada with its E2, and then you could simply spend the next couple of years while you're not going to be expatriating anyway. Maybe you'll never expatriate at all. I'm not here to tell you should expatriate. I'm saying you should be aware of your options. And so in those next couple of years, you could just look at getting some other passport, even one that just costs next to nothing. Get a paper residence, get a golden visa in some country. I mean, there's so many ways to get passports. Here's the second thing, right? I don't know that or at least in all the consulates, that there's necessarily a higher approval rate for an E2 than there is for a B1, B2 tourist visa. Certainly for someone where it's like, well, you did renounce. I think there are certain consulates in certain parts of the world where you're more likely to have success based on whether everyone else is getting approved or not. But the idea that this is some surefire way that if you invest money in a business, you have to get a visa, that's not how it works. We saw about 5 or 6 years ago, we tested out a European country. Hey, can we start a small business there? And it's kind of more of like pan-European. It's not really focused on that country. Yeah, the reality is no, the government wanted businesses that favored the local economy. That's maybe not the same thing that would apply to the United States, but the idea was just because you have a business idea and you say, hey, here's my money and the company's formed and I'm ready to go, doesn't mean that they'll approve you. And that's not just a US thing. This idea that people think they can renounce and magically get an E2. Is there a strategy to make that work? Yeah, quite possibly. But I wouldn't necessarily be paying $50,000 more. Now, there are some times when I've said, yeah, you should pay $50,000 more, and sometimes it's because, oh, Grenada also offers this, or this is allowed, or your family can come, and they're more flexible on whatever. So I'm not saying don't do Grenada. I'm not saying don't take advantage of the E2. I'm saying if that's your only reason, you want to consider as part of a holistic plan, is it worth paying $50,000 more than the alternative? Money that I could put towards some other passport to get to my goal as an American of having 3 passports. If my goal is already, I don't want to be American in the future, I don't want to be a single citizen. I don't want to only have 1 citizenship left if I ever leave. So let me get the second citizenship now, and why overpay to get that? So these are the kinds of things we go through. People come to us with, hey, I'll just get the E2 in Grenada. Not saying it's bad, but when you work with us, the idea is, how can we save you 50 grand? Sometimes we don't. Sometimes, hey, that is the best approach. But we want to call out the misconceptions because we're doing multi-jurisdictional holistic planning. It is not just, hey, this is a passport for sale, look at the benefits. It's, what are all the ways you can accomplish your goal? And there are dozens and dozens of different citizenships you could obtain. Why pay $50,000 more if you don't have to? That's what creating a holistic plan that covers hundreds of questions actually comes up with, rather than just buying something from a salesperson. It's what we do at Nomad Capitalist. You can learn more at nomadcapitalist.com. I have personally given up U.S. citizenship, so I know what your thought process is. I'm not saying it's for everybody by any means, but I want to make sure people don't overpay, and I want to make sure people don't get false hopes.